This is the Apex Bros Podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the second episode of the Apex Bros Pod. I'm joined by myself, obviously, Leander. We're joined by Max, Rob, and a new member. Introduce yourself.
Well, my name is Nate, and I'm about closest to what I'm doing, so we're going to see how bad I can screw this up.
That's it. That's exactly what Cody said last week. They fit right in. Speaking of Cody, Rob, would you like to tell the audience what's happening?
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, you got to listen to this shit, all right? So we're sitting here getting ready to record, 4th of July night, just sitting around, hanging outside, fireworks going off in the background, it's whatever, right? Dude messages us like 5 minutes prior to recording. He's like, dude, I can't fucking believe this, but my power's out. Like, some idiot hit it with some fireworks. And I was like, well, when you live in bum-ass Tennessee with some bum-ass southern neighbors, they're going to bring the power lines down. You hear me? They're going to bring them down. So, anyway, that's why Cody isn't here, because those power lines went down just like his prediction at Nashville.
Ooh.
Oh, my goodness.
Dude, speaking of
Maybe
which...
they can all just hold hands and sing Rocky Top, and it'll come back on.
Well, speaking of which, Max, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to talk about how awful all of our picks were.
Hey, whoa, wait a minute, wait a minute.
The exception of you, Leander. All of our picks...
You got P6.
Okay, but still, I got beat. But most of our picks did not turn out well, especially Cody's. My goodness. Cody's picks were... Okay, it was supposed to be one, but he picked two. So he picked Chastain and Larson. And if that's not bad luck in itself of how Cody is going to pick his drivers each week, I would hate to be those drivers that Cody's picking each week, because he picked two...
He's got the Bob Hawkins curse for a second.
He does. He picked two drivers, and they both... finished terribly.
I think Darian would be proud of him.
What is it?
100%.
Rob, you picked... Who'd you pick?
Chase Elliott. You picked Chase Elliott.
Chase Elliott. He ran out of fuel. I picked Blaney. He finished 6th, and Leander beat all of us. He picked Reddick, who finished 2nd that race.
Hooray! Hooray! Stage 1 winner from last year.
I was unironically... After Hamlin wrecked out, or he ran out of fuel, I was unironically hoping Reddick would win that race. But...
you just love 2311. You just love 2311.
I was rooting for Corey LaJoie.
I have a 2311 hat anyway, so...
Wait,
Corey
Rob,
LaJoie.
don't you mean LaJoie?
Corey LaJoie win. His win would have fed generations. And by
generations of families.
Generations of...
And then we almost got Zane Smith.
Generations of Twitter trolls. That's what it would have fed.
Oh, yeah, true.
But, anyway...
and then, here we go. F1 picks. Cody.
Oh, yeah! Yes, dude! Dude, okay. If this keeps happening, we need Cody to pick Max Verstappen each week now.
Yeah,
that's the only way.
We know who the fuck's winning. It's Max Verstappen.
Yep.
No.
Yep. And, dude, Leander, you and I were actually really close to almost getting our picks right. Unironically. Yeah, which we will talk about in the Formula 1 segment.
Hey, listen. At least my pick finished the race, okay? Just saying.
Here we go.
All right. Well, if it wasn't for your pick, moving over in the break... All right, whatever. We'll get into it later.
And anyways, I know what all of our picks are here at the podcast. We pick Victory Fuel because you always are fueled by victory when you're drinking Victory Fuel. Please use code APEX10. That's APEX10. But yeah, it's going to be a great podcast. We're going to have a little bit of fired up news here. A lot of breaking news past few days. But yeah, it should be fun.
Alrighty. So jumping right into things, we're going to go ahead and take a look at Formula 1. Going to get into some news, and we're just going to recap what events took place in Austria. Leander, go ahead, take it away.
Yeah, big ol' Austria ting. Red Bull Ring always putting up a class of a show. George Russell, big ol' yabba dabba doo boy over there. He won the second race of his young career. or his kind of old career, because he's kind of in the middle there. But second race of his career, first of the season, surprisingly. Mercedes have a win this early in the season. I would have not expected it, especially from Russell. I would have expected from Hamilton maybe, but Mercedes definitely getting into the groove here as of late. But the question we want to ask, of course, is he due for a contract extension at the end of 2025? There's a lot of speculation for their driver next year. It just came out today that Toto Wolff was having relations with Fernando Alonso for the seat coming up there, but Alonso declined. What do y'all think? Do you think George Russell deserves a seat for 2025 and beyond?
I think so. I mean, you take a look at what he's been able to do. Yeah, he's only had 2 wins of his career so far, but they've come at very important times for the Mercedes team. I think that his contract's not up till next year, so you obviously got time to negotiate a deal, but I think if you're Toto, you gotta at least secure one of your rides long term. So I'm thinking you sign Russell until probably 2029, 2030. Give him some more time to develop, try to get him a few more wins, some more podiums. I would invest everything you got into Russell's car and see if he can be a long-term answer just like Lewis Hamilton was.
I mean,
Yeah,
not only that, but while they have George Russell in there, it buys Toto Wolff more time to get Ollie Behrman into the seat for a potential Mercedes ride, because I think if I read correctly,
Ollie Behrman's Ferrari. I think you
Okay.
mean the other Prema driver was just Kimmy.
yeah, that's
Kimi
okay.
Antonelli.
Yeah, that's what I got it mixed up with. I knew Toto was trying to get like the new Max Verstappen up in there, and I was confusing the Ollie Behrman news with Kimmy. So, but yeah, I was trying to say I think the smartest decision for Toto is to keep George Russell there for a multi-year contract, and then gives him enough time to get someone else to fill in that second driver role until he gets Kimmy into F1.
Yeah, I think, me personally, I would sign Russell for however many years. If you have Russell and Kimmy in the same lineup next year, I think it would make sense. I know you're rushing Kimmy. I don't personally think he's fully ready for the opportunity. But if you are going to put him up, just put Russell and Antonelli there as your 1-2 punch, and I think you'll have a lineup there for a pretty long time. I mean, I know Red Bull wishes they had, say, Verstappen and Lawson in that first team, but Liam just hasn't gotten the opportunity to get up there yet. So,
Yeah,
and then you
and
also see Ferrari with Lewis coming in there, so you get an older guy, and you got Leclerc there, who's proven winner. So the
So
dynamics coming up will be very interesting.
my question is with Mercedes. Well, I'll let Rob talk in a second, but my question for Mercedes is they've built that team off of Hamilton. Like they've built that team around Hamilton since he joined them in 2013. How are they going to adapt around building the team around a younger driver lineup with George Russell and Kimmy coming into the seat in the next couple of years? That's my question. How are they gonna like mold themselves to what they've been known for, like championship winning team for the past 10 years pretty much, to trying to accommodate the younger drivers' needs now?
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting because they actually built the team around Rosberg back when they started out like fully, and then they got Hamilton after Schumacher, and they started building around him. So I expect it to be Russell for the first year, and then they're gonna try and mold Antonelli into their next Lewis. Like he can come in, but also into a Verstappen. So he's kind of like a hybrid of the two. And that could be dangerous for what's to come for the field. But I think that's what they're gonna do. They're gonna focus on Russell for maybe a year or two, and then Antonelli, once he's 19 or 20, he'll get that shot where he can just shoot out a cannon and new regulations and just probably take the field by storm based on his talent level alone.
Yeah, I definitely think, if you're making comparisons, you got to think Mercedes has kind of been like the Hendrick Motorsports of F1. You know, they've been such a dominant force for such a long time. You know, Lewis Hamilton's been their Jimmy Johnson or their Jeff Gordon. But just like how Hendrick had drivers, they had Chase Elliott and William Byron in the wings ready to go that have been proven to be successful. You know, plenty of wins, a championship between the two of them. I think you're going to use Russell as a nice veteran presence for Kimi. It looks like Russell's starting to find his groove, find his feet. And, you know, the better that he runs this season, the more confidence I think Toto's going to have in him to be that mentor that Lewis was to him. I think that George Russell's in a prime position in his career. And I think, you know, if he can take advantage of that, and if Kimi can take the raw talent that he has and take pointers from Russell and be able to develop and fine tune it over the next season or two, then I definitely think that Mercedes could still be a dominant force for the next 10, 15 years.
Yeah, with those new regs, it's going to be interesting. Another breaking new signing, Ollie Behrman. This was like kind of leaked a month ago, but official today, as of today, July 4th. Ollie Behrman signs with the American team, Haas F1. They're not real American, kind of British, but we'll take it. He signs with Haas for a multi-year deal. Definitely looks like 25 and 26. Maybe Lewis's contract ends in 26. We don't know for sure, but it's looking like that's the case. I do want to start it out by saying great signing for Haas. Good for the relationship between Haas and Ferrari. Haas have been making huge gains as of recent. They had just in Austria, they had a double points day, which were the championship and season. You got progress back to what you could have been in 2017, where they had almost a podium in a couple of races. Like that was fourth and fifth, and I think it was Australia. Like they were fourth and fifth, and they almost had a podium. Like that. That's the Haas we want to see as Americans on the 4th of July. Woo freedom, but also woo Haas because they made a great signing. Moving on, the major point of our show, which is Lando versus Max. Not you, Maximus. I know you wish you were.
Yeah, I've got to clear the air, guys.
Yeah.
Clear
It's
the
not
air.
him.
It's not me. As much as I wish it was, not me.
Yeah, it's not Maximus Molina. He would not move under braking. But I'm just gonna put this out there. I think it's just racing. Call me to NASCAR out. Call me to IndyCar wheel to wheel action out. I think it was just racing. Both of them going for the same spot. Both of them trying to win. They both know that they got to hold off the other to win the race. That was for the race win. If one of them gets out in front, it's done. I think it was a racing deal. That's what Danny Ricciardo said. He said he felt there was nothing wrong with the moves and they were just putting everything at each other. And I think they're good enough friends, Lando and Max, to where it won't affect their friendship too much. I know Lando's probably hurt that he got wrecked, but I mean it's racing at one of the highest levels of motorsport, so you got to expect. Max hasn't had to race a lot of people in the past few years, so you kind of expect it. Same thing with Hamilton and the McLaren back in the day. He also had these issues, so it'll be interesting to see what comes of it. But I'm under the impression it's just racing. I don't think there was malicious intent.
I mean, I don't know if there's malicious intent per se, but I feel like, Max Verstappen's got 7 wins. He's got a good cushion on the points lead right now. Why would you make a move that would risk, a good finish for yourself or another win to extend your points lead by being kind of foolish and going up and trying to block the lane that somebody's already beside you in? Like,
well,
it doesn't
it's
make
for a win.
I think
It's for a win.
I think to that point, Rob, we've seen that move happen in the past couple years. I saw a clip on Twitter somewhere where it was a Ferrari, I assume Charles Leclerc, putting the same move on Verstappen, except Verstappen was in Lando's position 2 years ago where he was pushed to the curb or the rumble strips entering turn 3, and Verstappen just basically had to straddle that rumble strip to avoid contact. So
Everybody was sending it.
Yeah, I mean, Lando was sending it on the inside every chance he got. And at some point, it's just not going to work out. And, it's just, like Leander said, it's hard racing. When I first saw it, I thought, I was on the train where it was a bunch of people hating on Max for moving and braking and saying he can't race clean when he actually has someone to fight with, but, letting it simmer and looking back at the footage, it's definitely a racing thing. But if we're going to go back on, what happened a couple years ago to Max, Lando probably could have done what Max did in that situation, just straddle the curb more going into the turn to avoid the contact. Because if we were able to do that, we wouldn't have this, this crazy last few laps.
I know the clip you're talking about, the Leclerc Verstappen, or was it Science? It was one of the Ferraris.
Yeah, it was one of the Ferraris, and they squeezed Max to the limit of the track, and Max just pretty much had to go into the rumble strips to avoid contact, but they were still able to keep their cars clean and continue going.
At the same time, you look at it, and Lando already had a wheel inside when Max decided to move up the racetrack. Like, I'm not saying that it was purposely done, but I mean, you just look at it, and it's just like, I
know what you're saying.
I don't think that Max doing that, even if he would have fell back to second and finished second compared to Norris, I mean, it doesn't affect you on the points that much. You got 7 wins on the year. I don't think you need to race that aggressively. I mean, if I'm Lando Norris and I'm trying to move up in the points, I mean, I would be upset, and rightfully so. I mean, Max has been aggressive like this before. I mean, maybe not to this extent. But I mean, when you're taking yourself out and somebody else out for a win, it's never a good thing for either driver. Lando's hungry. After getting that first win, he got that taste of victory. He wants more. He's trying to get out of the shadow of Max and Lewis, and who can blame him?
Yeah, but at the same time, if you saw how deep Lando was in sending it, and that almost took out Max twice, you can't really blame either of them for racing how they did. They're going for the win. That's all we can ask for as race fans. They're going for the win. They don't want to settle.
Considering the last few years of how lackluster competition's been for Verstappen, to Leanna's point, it's very refreshing to see something like this happen. I mean, we've seen contact happen in Austria before in that specific corner. Aside from what I mentioned before in 2022, the last interesting moment I remember in that corner was 2019 with Leclerc and Verstappen, when Ferrari was in McLaren's position today, where Ferrari was able to take the fight. Well, at the time it was Mercedes that was on the top, but in that scenario, you had people making contact and going to that corner, that run up to that corner, like 2019, 2016 with Rosberg and Hamilton. I mean, I feel like that corner is notorious for dive bombs and wrecks and contact. So
for sure,
that's understandable. To be expected. That's understandable. I just think if you're Lando, you let stuff like that, it kind of gets to you. Maybe Lando has to start being more aggressive himself. Maybe Lando needs to not cut as much slack.
And I just think, like Horner said, he has to learn how to race Max. It's just the reality nowadays. Everybody had to learn 5 years ago how to race Lewis, and Bottas learned the hard way.
Also, to that point as well, is how, to Rob's point, or to Rob's question, is how's Norris going to learn, how to race Verstappen by making mistakes like this, and it makes him understand Max's ideology or his strategy in these close battles. So I think the more and more they race around each other, the more Norris is gonna gain more knowledge and experience in battling someone of Max's caliber, and eventually over time we're gonna see a lot more clean battles with those two going forward before the regulation changes in the next couple of years. But for the time being, it's gonna take Norris pretty much the rest of the season to make the mistakes, learn from mistakes, and get better, pretty much.
Take the fight to next year. Next year, you can really, really go for the championship. So I'd use this time to learn.
Exactly.
So I think this brings us into our last point of the F1 topic for tonight. Is Verstappen's aggressiveness of the season going to come back to haunt him at some point? Well, obviously, we know the wins. We know his point situation. Technically, he can't clinch for a little while longer. However, he starts slipping up, racing guys a little bit too aggressively. And, again, same can be said for Lando. But you look at the situation, you look at how Max has kind of been racing, again, like Max and Leander both said, he's had to race more aggressively because there's more competition around him. It's not Lewis Hamilton per se, but you have guys like George Russell, Carl Sands, and Lando Norris.
Leclerc.
So
Leclerc as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're
So,
gonna
I mean,
have a
it's
lot of
just-
people up there soon.
I think my best point I can bring forward to this conversation is with Max Verstappen's aggressiveness, is it going to come back to haunt him? What happened in 2018 between Ricciardo and Verstappen at Baku? Max did pretty much, not exactly the same, but he moved under braking going to turn 1 on Ricciardo when Ricciardo's trying to pass him. Teammates colliding at very high speed. And what has happened since then? So, end of 2018, Ricciardo gets booted from Red Bull. But what has happened to Verstappen? Has he changed his driving style since then? I don't think so.
No, hell no.
So if that happened back then and nothing's changed, I don't think I don't know if what the consequences are going to be for Verstappen if this keeps happening. If he, I mean, obviously these cars are a lot different than they were like 4 years ago or
But they have
8
a
years
lot of
ago.
similarities too.
But yes, they have a lot of similarities, and it's going to take a lot of learning from both parties, like Verstappen and Norris, to not let that happen.
Yeah,
And
I will say one thing I'm worried about is we're gonna see Lando make a desperate move, and he's gonna try and do a Max Verstappen, send it in there, and then Max isn't gonna back down. They're gonna end up taking each other out, which pretty much happened already. But I think Lando's gonna try and push that envelope, and he might get bit in the ass for it.
Do you think it's going to get to the levels of 2021 Italy with Hamilton and Verstappen? Do you think it's going to get that bad?
Maybe.
It has the potential to. It does have the potential to.
Do you think they have to take it that far to understand that they're getting too much from the situation? Do you think they're do you think that the aggressiveness has to reach that kind of level for them to say, okay, we need to chill out?
That's a no on that one because they are friends.
I think
so.
It's
I think it'll be less.
Things, it's one of those things where Lando Norris is trying to prove that he can be a top guy in the sport. Max Verstappen is trying to prove that he is now the top guy in the sport because him and Lewis have been battling for that top spot for years. And now that Lewis is starting to fall off a little bit, starting to regress, Max is kind of taking that stranglehold on being the top guy in F1. And, Lando's still young. Lando's got a lot to prove. And, winning that race a few weeks back, that silenced a lot of people. There have been a lot of people rooting for him. And now that he's got that win, and now it's like, oh, shit, there's someone that might be able to compete with Max Verstappen over the next few years. Lando has got the chip on his shoulder to prove that that win was just not a flash in the pan.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And I do think it won't reach to the point of Hamilton and Verstappen at that race, but I think if they weren't such good friends, it would have gone that far. But I think the power of friendship will always prevail. Call me Hallmark movie. But
a little bit of camera action.
Oh yeah, dude. Oh yeah. But, anyways, that's it for our F1 segment. For me, there is no endurance news as of late, except for Delatraz going to AO Racing for a race, doing double duty for the next race. So, yeah, I'm gonna let Max, Rob, and Nate take it away for the next couple segments.
Moving on from Formula 1 to the NASCAR scene, we just got back from Nashville. Crazy, insane race. At least the last quarter of the third stage was crazy. We got Rob, Nate, and myself talking about the previous week in racing at Nashville with the Xfinity Series, Truck Series, and Cup Series racing there. First off, let's talk about Joey Logano's win in Nashville after 5 overtime attempts. Rob, take it away.
So, yeah, crazy scenes in Nashville. 5 overtime attempts, most in NASCAR Cup Series history. A lot of guys risking it for the biscuit, so to say. A lot of guys trying to stretch it on fuel. Couldn't do it, except for one man, Joey Logano. Gets his first one of the season after what have many considered kind of a down year for them. But now all 3 members of Penske are in the playoffs. But I think Logano's win, as much as he was able to save, I think more of the credit goes to Paul Wolfe. And, I think he's one of the most underrated crew chiefs in NASCAR history and doesn't get talked about enough. I think he might be one of the greatest strategists that we've ever seen in NASCAR. I mean, his pit strategy and fuel strategy is second to none. He did it with Keselowski when Penske was with Dodge. Won a championship with Keselowski. Most of Keselowski's wins came with Paul Wolfe. He comes over the switch from Dodge to Ford, comes over to Joey Logano, and continues his winning ways, wins another title, and now he's got another win off of fuel strategy that he made. They took 2 tires and filled the thing up with fuel and made it 110 laps on old left sides in a single stop for fuel. Is Paul Wolfe a top 5 crew chief in history? What do you guys think?
I think it's tough to make a case currently because of how much things have changed since NASCAR began in the 40s. If you had Paul Wolfe crew chiefing back in the 40s, there's no contest that he is the greatest crew chief of all time, because his knowledge today is it's gonna be like alien talk to back in the 50s and 60s. It's hard to compare Paul Wolfe to the greats of the sport in crew chiefing, like Dale Inman back in the day, all those guys. It's hard to do that because of how much times have changed with the cars, the sport, and everything inside and out. But I will say I do believe he is a top 5 crew chief in the modern era. That's like from, I think, the 80s-ish. I want to say modern era, which is like around the turn of the century, 2000 to currently, but it's way before that. But if you put him in that category from crew chiefs from turn of the century, 2000 to currently, I believe he is top 5 in that category. Top at the very tip top is Chad Knaus. No questions asked. Chad Knaus. Then you got Steve Letarte. Who else? Maybe Alan Gustafson.
Alan Gustafson.
Yep.
And Scott Zipadelli.
Scott Zipadelli, 4th, and then 5th probably had to be Paul Wolfe. I would switch him out with Gabe Hart, just because it's my preference. Denny Hamlin's crew chief, but the way Gabe Hart works is obviously a lot more different than Paul Wolfe. But I mean, that's my top 5 for crew chiefs from 2000 to current day.
Yeah, I think like you said, maybe he's not top 5 all time. Maybe he's closer to top 10, top 15. But I mean, you talk about 2000 to now, and it's hard to think of a crew chief that can out-strategize him. Like, you take a look at all the current crew chiefs, Rudy Fugle, Alan Gustafson, Booty Barker, himself, Paul Wolfe. I think he's definitely got a mind for strategy that I think is definitely top of the board. I think when it comes to pit strategy, he might be number 1.
I think that's something Penske as a whole does really well. I mean, I think if you take all of Penske's wins within the past 5 years, half of them are strategy, and then the other half is just pure talent. And I'd say 2% of that is just dumb luck. I mean, look at Austin Cindric at Gateway a couple weeks ago. even though Ryan Blaney was well on his way to a win, that it just didn't pan out that way. But Austin Cindric is in that 2% of pure dumb luck. But I thinking about the 5 overtime attempts, and this y'all will find this funny. So my wife is so out of the loop in NASCAR. She enjoys it. She's found her favorite driver. She's new to it. Same with wrestling. Like we got in WWE, now we can't miss a Monday Night Raw or Friday Night SmackDown or a pay-per-view. And but we was watching that race, and she was sitting there asking me how many laps is left. And I was like, you see that left-hand corner? That's how many. Just, count down from there. But we got to those 5 overtime attempts. I think it was like attempt 3. And she goes, good God, is this race ever going to end? And then I walk into the living room because, so our house is divided. You have our half, and then you have my in-laws' half. And it was like the 4th overtime attempt, and I was getting ready to go in there and tell my father-in-law, who's, an older NASCAR fan. I was like, hey, you've got to watch this race. This is wild. I walk in there. He's got it on. He's like, good God, this race ain't never going to end. So it's so funny seeing these fans who aren't like these older fans who aren't really in the loop anymore. And then people like my wife who has never been in the loop but tries to watch it, I guess, for moral support. And just seeing these 5 overtimes, I got to admit, I was getting pretty anxious myself as to how that was going to go. But not to get sidetracked off of that, but man, what a great race. Nashville, we're in year 3 of this track being on the Cup Series schedule. And it's quickly become one of my favorites. I whether it's down to fuel strategy overtime, it's great racing. Absolutely great racing.
Yeah, and it's crazy to me. You look at, when, a lot of those guys last pitted for Logano, it was lap 221. You look at Briscoe, same thing. Then you had other guys like Hocevar and Hamlin and Larson who are all on different strategies, and LaJoie too. And, it's crazy how they were able to pull it off. Like 110 laps on one tank of fuel is just absurd.
That's
And it's
my
just
thing.
absurd. We had 31 additional laps in this race, which is absurd as well.
That's my thing because there's no, according to Chase Briscoe's strategy, there's absolutely no way Logano should have won that race or even been able to restart that last overtime restart. It's just insane how they made that fuel last for 110 laps. Absolutely insane.
And then to find nothing wrong.
Nothing
wrong in post-race.
Exactly. In post-race inspection, nothing came up. And an interesting tidbit that I learned from listening to Denny's podcast, Actions Detrimental, was that no 2 fuel cells are the same in, each other's teams, like Penske might be running different fuel cells from JGR and so on and so forth. It may be different to certain manufacturers, the fuel cell size and, how much, is able to be consumed for 110 laps, as an example, like what happened last night. And caution laps for certain helped out with Logano being able to make it, but even with that, it's just it's mind-boggling how they managed to save him that much fuel under caution in racing, because they pitted under green. I'm pretty sure they pitted. I think it was under green.
221.
Yeah, 221 all the way to 2 to go.
331.
And then 330. It's just unreal. But
and I definitely think it definitely brings up a topic that, it kind of just segues right into it, Is there adjustments that Chevy and Toyota need to make to kind of match Ford's fuel economy?
Absolutely. If we're in a sport with only 3 manufacturers, and everybody wants to be competitive, everybody wants to be the best. The only way to do that is try to even the odds. If you can't even the odds, you got to try to beat them. And I think we're in a sport where it's not about being even, it's about beating them. I don't know the specifics of what they're going to have to do, but if I was Chevy, if I was Toyota, I'd be having meetings with every one of my teams and saying, okay, what are they doing right that we're doing wrong right now as far as fuel economy? Because it seems like every fuel race, it seems to be a Ford, unless another team is just that dang good at their strategy, and that's just not been the case. Ford has been on it with strategy and with fuel races for sure.
I think they're 1-1 for fuel racing. If you think back to Gateway, Blaney running short by 1 lap. But I mean, to your point, Nate. I mean, yeah, Penske, I mean, Ford and everything as a whole have been head and shoulders above Toyota and Chevy with fuel saving and fuel strategy. And I kind of like this fuel strategy racing. I mean, it takes me back to, pre-stage racing, how teams kind of had to strategize their race, kind of like a road course. They had to strategize it from the finish to start. They had to do it reverse. So they had to figure out what laps they had to pit by so they can make it to the end. And that's why I've been loving this year so far. Has been pit strategy. Has been almost kind of revived in a sense to how it used to be before we got stage breaks and stage racing.
Yeah, and the cool thing about these overtimes, I will say, with the different strategies that were going on, is that you saw guys up in the top 10 and top 5 that you weren't expecting to see. Like, you look at the third and fourth overtime, we had all 3 Spire cars in the top 10. A lot of people thought Corey LaJoie was going to win. Then, Hosafar was creeping up in there. And then Zane Smith actually almost beat Logano.
I'm pretty sure if any of those Spire Motorsports drivers had won that race Saturday, it would have been end of society as we knew it.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
I think Nashville has shown that Spire still has potential in Cup. The question is, with McDowell moving in next year, can they finally capitalize on that and get their first win that's not from a rain delay?
I really don't know. Zane Smith, and this is not a knock on Zane Smith. I think he's a very talented driver, but he and Corey LaJoie have been in a battle with each other, and who can finish worse each week. I mean, Carson Hocevar is in a league of his own, way overperforming what you would expect the Spire team to do. I mean, he's done better than what Justin Hailie's done. He's done better than what Reed Sorensen or Quinn Half has done, obviously. Because, I mean, you got to think, Spire has grown leaps and bounds in every aspect, from equipment to sponsorship. I mean, they went from a one-car team that was starting parked just about every race to now we've got a team that goes out there and they're bringing big sponsorships. Their cars are always wrapped with something. They're not running black cars anymore. But Zane Smith getting that second place finish was not on my bingo card for Nashville, and I don't think it was on anybody's. But when I remember it was it was the second overtime attempt. I was in another group chat and I sent this message. I said, "This is a great night for Spire Motorsports." Little did I know we'd have 3 more restarts, but the point still stood, and I could have easily jinxed that for Spire and had that whole team down my throat. But man, what a great day for Spire. That right there, and that money from second place is going to go a long way with that team. Whether it go to the 71, the 7, the 77, second place finish is not too shabby, no matter how you get it.
Well,
and the crazy part about it, sorry, Max,
no,
I'll
you
let
good,
you get to your point just a second. The crazy thing about it is that Zane Smith's second place, he was last in terms of full-time drivers and points. Could you imagine how much that would have shook off the playoffs if he would have won?
I mean,
but
to that point, there is like that rule to where they took out you have to be like above 30th place in points to become eligible for playoffs. So yeah, if Zane Smith would have won that race, it would have destroyed a bunch of people's playoff brackets.
Would have busted mine.
Yeah. But I think, there's a little bit bigger talking point for Spire with Hocevar that I know Nate mentioned. And I know, Max, you were wanting to get into it.
Yeah, I mean, when Nate was talking about, how Zane got like a lot of points and money for Spire, That's going to be very crucial for Hocevar's fine and docking of 25 points, and his performance in Nashville, aside from being strong and competitive, was very erratic and reckless, to say the least. The question being here is there a very concerning pattern forming with Hocevar and his issue with wrecking people or wrecking himself out of good runs for these races?
So it's a double-edged sword, and I'll tell you why it's a double-edged sword. Because we've seen this style of racing over the years. We've seen it work for guys like Kyle Busch. We've seen it work for Dale Earnhardt. And recently, we've seen it work for Ross Chastain when he made his way to the championship floor a couple of years back. So, is there a place for it? Yes. Is it the most commemorable and respectable way to get there? No. But I think a lot of it has to do with his inexperience. I mean, you got to think, the dude jumped from truck straight to cup. And he might be running better than what people expect in Inspire equipment, but I still think if you wanted to capitalize on his potential, you should have given him a year or two in Xfinity.
I mean, not only that, but with Hocevar having to be aggressive in these races, it's almost encouraged by this racing with this car, because the only way you're going to be able to pass someone on a short track or a mile and a half most times is if you rough them up or bump them out of the way. And even then at short tracks, it's hard to even bump someone out of the way. So I'm interested to see what Nate has to say about what Hocevar has to do going forward to get good finishes, but eliminate this reckless habits.
I think Carson is in a place like Noah Gragson in the Xfinity Series when he's running for junior. I don't remember how far along this podcast was, but on Dale Junior Download one day, I was listening to it, and Junior said that when Noah first came to the team, it was either he spent every race with a top 5 to a win, and when he wasn't doing that, he was wrecking everybody else, wrecking himself. And Junior just had to set him down and say, look, you're talented, you're good, but we need that consistency that you have with these 4 or 5 races every once in a while with the other 30-plus tracks we've got on the schedule. And I think Spire's management's going to have to do the same thing. That if he wants to have a career in the Cup Series, if he wants to be competitive, if he wants to win, as Rob said, there's a time and a place for it. And he's got to be very, very careful because we've seen it before. These rides can come and go just as quick as you sign the contract. These teams are multi-million-dollar deals. If they sign you, they expect you to, 1, keep the equipment clean, and 2, be competitive. Well, you can be competitive and wreck people, but guess what? Your car's not clean.
And that costs team money.
Yeah, you can play it safe and not be competitive. So Carson's got to find this balance to really make the investment by Spire Motorsports worthwhile. And I think I've seen the potential, and I think it's going to take some time, but I think it comes down to management pretty much threatening within an inch of his life to say, straighten up or you're gone. And he'll either pout like a baby about it, or he'll say, yes, sir, I understand. Then he'll go out there and, make something happen.
I find it the irony of what you said about Gragson and Dale Jr., them having that talk and Jr. pretty much setting Noah straight, is very similar to what I heard as well on the Dale Jr. podcast when Dale had to sit Hocevar down when he was wrecking in the truck series of, hey, what's the deal? You got to stop wrecking these trucks when you're in good position. And I just find it interesting how Gragson and Hocevar had that same, or having that same linear path of learning how to race respectfully but aggressively. And part of that is how they learn how to race in Xfinity Series, and I feel like that's going to play perfectly into our next talking point, is how John Hunter Nemechek goes from Cup to Xfinity part-time to win the Nashville race. And we saw a couple of contact and incidents with throughout the field. Like one of them was Allgaier and Gibbs come out of turn 4, and that was a racing deal. You know, it was just Allgaier just getting Gibbs arrow loose and spinning him out right in front of himself, Allgaier. And my question is like, is Xfinity now the top tier series for young drivers to learn how to race respectfully? And is that going to be valuable in the Cup Series when they move up?
I would say yes and no. Obviously, you can. I mean, I think all of us can agree that the Xfinity Series is probably the best series that NASCAR has right now in terms of just pure racing.
No, it's definitely ARCA.
But no, Xfinity Series, you know, you have those guys that have been in Cup, but actually go back to Xfinity and race in Xfinity full time. You know, Allgaier is a great example of that, you know. But you can't really necessarily count out trucks because you see a lot of guys from trucks that are in Cup now that really didn't go through Xfinity. I mean, Corey Heim is getting Cup starts, and he hasn't really been in many Xfinity races. Kosovar's jumped up. Todd Gilliland as well. There's already been talks of Roger Carruth possibly going to Cup in the next year or two already. Like, I think the Truck Series is where teams are starting to see the potential of drivers. And as much as I hate to say it, Xfinity is more of a feeder series than the trucks are.
I will say this right before we get to Nate's talking point is, I remember having a talk with Leander a couple of days ago where how we were talking about Sam Mayer being upset, you know, he hasn't gotten any Cup offers yet. I feel like the younger you get a driver from Xfinity or trucks into Cup, it gives them more time, like Harrison Burton, for an example, to get themselves acclimated with the next gen car faster, because these young guys are able to adapt to new forms of racing faster than any of these older guys like Kyle Busch, Denny Hamlin, MTJ are able to do. You know, over, even though these guys have had 2 to 3 years of experience with this car, if you get a younger guy like Roger Carruth, like Corey Heim in next gen time and into a next gen ride and have that experience for when they're about to be moved to full time Cup, I feel like that's a lot more valuable than being in Xfinity. Than, you know, being in any ride in Xfinity could do for you to get to Cup. And at that same expense, is it better to stick to those lower series and be more competitive versus being in where kind of Corey Heim was in this past weekend in Nashville, where he's part-time Cup, and yes, he's shown speed, but is that gonna, you know, continue for a full-time season in that type of ride in 2311?
I'm going to be honest. I think most of these young drivers need to be on like a 4 or 5 year plan for Cup. You know, 2 years in truck, 2 years in Xfinity, second year in Xfinity, maybe with some Cup starts, and then that 5th year in Cup. I feel like if you can get these guys on a 4 or 5 year plan, it'll do you better overall than just having 1 year in truck, or 1 year in truck and 1 year in Xfinity, and then you're in Cup. You know, these guys may be young and they may be talented, but they've got to have that time to develop. And I mean, you're going to develop more in the truck and Xfinity series, you know, than, you know, 1 year in Cup. Because I think you take 2 years in truck and, you know, and a year in Xfinity, and then you put them in Cup, you know, by that point, they're more refined. They know more of what to do, what not to do, you know, finding that line between aggressive and conservative versus where you're taking, you know, like I said, Corey Heim, you know, he's shown speed, but I mean, the finishes in Cup haven't been there. I mean, he is very talented, and that's not a knock on him. He's very talented, but you can definitely tell that another year in an Xfinity or truck season would definitely help him out.
And it shows how different of a time that we live in now. You look back in the 80s and 90s, you had guys like Jeff Gordon, who was, you know, driving grassroots kind of racing, moves up to the Busch Series, and then moves up to the Cup Series and sets the world on fire. Same with guys like Mark Martin. Heck, even Michael Waltrip was one of these who jumped from nothing to the big leagues. And I think we're at a place now where there's two arguments to be made. Either we've got to quit looking at Xfinity and Truck as a feeder series and start looking at them as their own individual flagship kind of deals, or we've got to keep what we're doing. Okay, well, here's the ladder. You start late models, then you move up to ARCA, then you move up to trucks, then Xfinity, then Cup. And there's pros and cons to both. And it's just, I think it truly comes down to individual drivers. You've got guys in the late model series who are burning it up on the grassroots circuit, but then they get a Cup Series start and they fumble. In that same token, you've got guys like Bubba Pollard, Carson Quapple. Both of these guys are grassroots racers. They get an Xfinity car, they're setting the world on fire. So I think it's a case-by-case basis. I can agree there's a lot of drivers like Corey Heim who can be successful in a smaller division, but then go to Cup and struggle. So it's case by case. Some guys are ready, some guys aren't, and that's just the way it is.
And I think it's the nature of the beast. For these teams, they don't want their drivers poached, and they kind of have to move them up quicker. Max, I think you would agree on that aspect at least.
Yeah. It's important to have these younger guys to grow, perfect their work, their art in their own way, rather than just being tossed into a Cup car and learn with the SMT data the way it is nowadays. Learn how Denny Hamlin drives his car and shape their driving style from Denny's SMT or Christopher Bell's SMT. It's not just Cup. I think SMT data is shared through Xfinity trucks and everywhere. But I feel like just having the younger talent, being able to work their way up through the ladder, they should be, air quotes, should be being 1 or 2 years in each series, to be able to prove themselves in their own respect. And trucks, Xfinity and Cup, just the 3-1's an example. To Nate's point, we gotta start treating these top three and series and ARCA and everything below as their own respectable series to base a driver's skill level and expectations and their ability. And a good talking point we're going to move on to, which flows into, is Christian Eckes' performance at Nashville, leading flag to flag, green flag to checkered flag, pure domination, led every single lap. What does that do for Christian Eckes' stock in the NASCAR scene? Does it turn some more heads in the Xfinity garage to get a full-time ride within the next year or so? And does that also lead to a potential part-time Cup ride like we've seen, like one-offs like Corey Heim this season? Like, what is that going to form up to be in the next couple of years?
I think that's a great point, and I'm glad you brought it up. I'm very glad you brought up Christian Eckes. I think he's had enough time to develop in truck. Obviously, he came into truck a couple years ago as the defending ARCA champion at the time. And, he struggled that first year, but towards the end of the season, he got the hang of it. And you look at that to now, and you look at a guy like, wow, he's a truck championship contender. He's arguably one of the favorites to win the title this year. I don't know if he's ready for Cup per se, but he's definitely ready for Xfinity. The question is what team is going to give him that chance. And I think he's got two good opportunities. I think JGR would be an excellent fit for him, and I think Haas would be a good fit for him. I think that would be an ideal situation to be in where he can be a primary focus and spend a year or two in the Xfinity Series to develop even more and then be ready for Cup. I think he follows that traditional style timeline that I was talking about earlier. But I think Eckes is ready for Xfinity. I think he's proved without a shadow of a doubt he belongs. I think the question is now, can he take this truck success and turn it into an Xfinity win, 2 Xfinity wins, Championship 4 appearance, stuff like that.
And to your point, Rob, with Christian Eckes, you was talking about him with JGR. I see that making perfect sense because it seems like this year, not really in the past, but this year specifically, it seems like Joe Gibbs Racing Xfinity team is focused on one thing, and that is driver development. And that's something a lot of teams, I think, have really lacklustered. That if we're looking for the guys to fill these cup seats in the next 5, 10, 15 years, why are we wasting time by trying to field 4 full-time rides with 4 full-time drivers when there's guys who need the opportunity to show what they're made of? So with somebody like Christian Eckes, if I was Joe Gibbs, I wouldn't say, here, you've got the sponsorship money, we're going to sign you to a full season next season. Like, no, we're going to sign you to 5 races. Bring the sponsorship. We'll pick 5 tracks and we'll see how you do. It makes perfect sense.
I don't agree with him being part-time next year. I think he's had enough time in the Truck Series that he's warranted a full-time deal. I think it's just one of those things where he's been down there long enough. He's developed quite well. There's not much left for him to do down there besides win the title.
Right.
I think he's ready to go. I think you're right in terms of how these teams are doing it, because if you think about it, Junior Motorsports is the only 4-car team, I think, in Xfinity, if my math's correct.
I believe you're right.
And Joe Gibbs is down to 1, maybe 2. And a lot of these teams are down to like 1 or 2. You might have the occasional 3 with like Ryan Sieg, but those are guys that are actually Xfinity stalwarts. They have no intentions on moving up. You're looking for your next guy. Toyota, Chevrolet, and Ford have all got their ways of finding development drivers and putting them which way, where. But I think, you look at the situation, Eckes is more than ready. I think, if he's got the sponsorship and he's got the money, I think that's less relevant than, his talent that he has. I think he can go in there, run full time with Gibbs, and they can be top 5, top 10 every week. I don't see Christian Eckes not winning a race in Xfinity next year. He's going to be an Xfinity Series winner. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when.
And to that point, I also want to just bring up for a split second is when you're talking about like this Toyota development drivers, is it really better to have, like, when you're in like a development program to like Toyota, Chevy, or Ford, do you think it's better for these younger drivers to take their time to, aside from the point from, getting better at their own driving ability and everything and their skill, but not only that, but also have a more stable and secure job security, like ride in the Cup Series if they, when they get there, or, trucks, Xfinity? Is it better for them to take their time and, not prevent themselves from being rushed up the ladders to get a more secure ride year in and year out, rather than, when if Heim gets rushed up or something like that, where is he going to go? Is, he's with Toyota and he's run Toyota in trucks, Xfinity Cup. Is there going to be like enough seats in a good enough Toyota team in the Cup Series to be where he wants to be at the end of the day? My thing is, I don't think there is right now. That's why you gotta have guys in each of these development driver programs to take their time, so that when some of these veteran guys, some of these older guys retire, those seats open up for these younger guys that have been working on their craft and working on their skill level in these lower series. And once they get to those cup rides, they're gonna have a better shot at being more successful overall.
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail right on the head.
I agree.
I think go ahead, Nate.
I think the scary thing right now with getting people prepped for Cup is it seems like if you look at the Cup roster, there's only about 5 or 6 guys who I think are in the closing chapters of their career. So it's either going to be for these guys to move up. It's either some of these guys who are running lackluster or below expectation. They're going to have to be jobless, or more teams are going to have to open up. And with this current charter system, I don't see that happening, especially as friggin' expensive as it's gotten. So, and I know that's not really
so
on our
glad that
topic.
you brought that up. No, it is. Like, honestly, the charter systems made it to where teams have had to rush up guys quicker.
Yeah.
But you run into another problem too, where you have guys that are really good in Xfinity and aren't that good in Cup, but they're technically too good to be in Xfinity, if that makes sense.
Well, I think
I mean,
that's also a great discussion too, because when you got these younger guys that don't have enough experience in these series rush up to Cup, they're not going to have enough really speed or talent to show off, and that's going to transition this conversation beautifully into the IndyCar section here in a second, where we're going to talk about Newgarden saying he wants to race in the Cup Series, and how is he going to be able to prepare himself for a next-gen car like this at a track maybe like Bristol or Nashville he mentioned. How are we going to see outsiders like SVG? I mean, he came into the series last year and won in his first race at the Chicago Street Course. That played right into his wheelhouse, because these cars are very similar to these sports cars in Australia, and a street course, which is the main schedule of tracks they run in Australia in the sports cars series. How are like these other international guys gonna warm up to the Cup cars? Because we've seen in the road courses this season, we had a couple guys get practice in the Xfinity cars, and then they have a better understanding of how to drive the track in the Cup cars, even though Xfinity and Cup are still two different entities in terms of gearing and everything and how they drive. We're going to be talking about in IndyCar to start off how Newgarden is going to, race in the Cup Series here in a second.
So a couple other things before we switch over to IndyCar real quick. Just wanted to make a couple points here. Hailie Deegan is out at Chicago. Joey Logano got the call that he's in. Last minute, AM Racing wanted Logano in the car, wanted to get some data, quote unquote, for the race and for the future. Hailie's removed any references to AM Racing in her bio. The question that I have is Hailie's time in NASCAR coming to an end?
As much as I hate to say it, probably. And I hate that, because look, I'm a huge fan of what used to be the K&N East, K&N West, ARCA series. She done great down there. Won a couple races. Really just shown, okay, we might have a competitive female. And I want a competitive female. And they're out there. But it's not Hailie Deegan. And I hate the way AM's done it. Personally, I hate they signed her to begin with, because they had their guy with Brett Moffitt. Brett Moffitt was getting top 10s. He was running fairly competitive. Not setting the world on fire by any means, but not terrible. But I really wish AM would have went a different route with it. I'm sure Hailie Deegan does too. But I hate it. I wish that we could have seen more out of her. But again, you've been in the NASCAR ranks for 2-3 years now, and you've not really done anything of note. There comes a point in time where you're going to have to say, do I want to pursue this, or am I going to have to just take my interest elsewhere?
I'm on the same boat with you, Nate. Is when I first heard of Hailie Deegan, she was in top tier equipment in K&N East and West series at the time. Now it's the ARCA series, but the first thing I ever saw from her was her win in my home track at Meridian Speedway. Proud owner of that fact right there. She got her first win in the any NASCAR sanctioned race series at my home track, Meridian Speedway, which was awesome. But anyway, that was my first thing I heard about Hailie Deegan was her potential blockbuster talent or generational talent in ARCA, and what we could see from her when she gets moved into trucks, and then when she moved to trucks, dude, the Deegan train was on full speed ahead. I mean, it was like as if Danica Patrick Part 2 had come back out, and she was making a return to the Cup Series and everything, and it was like 2013 all over again. But it was like Hailie Deegan just going to trucks, and after 2 seasons in trucks, I really started to doubt Deegan's ability to run competitively, and just in her overall speed and in Thor Sport equipment. In a second, I think her second season she was in Thor Sport equipment, I believe, or yeah. But her teammates around her were winning races and even won championships when she was in that series, from 21 to 22, I believe, or 22 to 23, I believe. Yeah, but anyway, then she gets promoted up to Xfinity because of the fact that she's a female, and her history and her winning experience in ARCA, maybe fingers crossed, AM Racing was hoping that maybe Xfinity would be the car that would really click with Hailie, and she would be, lights out, or maybe she'd be running competitive like top 10s, top 5s week in and week out, the way, Brett Moffitt was, and maybe unlock something within the car in that team that would get him a win. But that just hasn't happened at all this season, and as much as I hate to say it, I think this is deserved, just because of the lack of speed that she's had ever since she joined the top 3 ranks in NASCAR. It's just a really, it's a sad thing to see, because I wish we could get the Hailie Deegan we saw at K&N, even though some say the way she won those races was very controversial by moving people out of the way that were leading in front of her, and she got the win. I mean, that's what it takes sometimes these days to win. When you have a chance, you don't know if you're going to get the opportunity again to win. So when you're in that position, you have to make those moves. But back to my point, I just wish we could have had Hailie Deegan from K&N series in, I could say better equipment, but it's just, I don't know. It's just so hard to really make a judgment call on what could have been with Hailie Deegan up to this point. Nothing's set in stone that she's leaving AM Racing or she's leaving NASCAR for good, but it's definitely looking a little hazy for her future in NASCAR.
Yeah, I think, talked about it before, the ones in the Canon Pro Series, top 5 finishes and points, things were looking up. Got the trucks, limited success. It's like, okay, maybe the trucks themselves are maybe the problem. Maybe she's better suited in a stock car rather than a stock truck. You move her up to Xfinity, she follows that ladder of, 2-3 years in truck, and it's just the results weren't there. And I think that's the simplest way to put it, and it's not a knock on her. Maybe it's the equipment that she's in. Maybe it's just the lack of, that gap of experience between ARCA and Xfinity. I think the way AM Racing went about it was completely unprofessional. I think that there's better ways that they could have handled this, and it's not the first time that we've seen something like this, and it won't be the last. But I think if you're signing somebody throughout a season, at least honor your deal.
I agree.
I think that's the main thing. Honor your deal, even if they're performing like dog shit. Honor your deal. I think that the integrity and the respect factor mean more than some lackluster finishes.
Unfortunately, to add on to that point, I touched on a little bit earlier about Carson Hocevar. From a business perspective, it's a return on investment. This team's going to give you equipment. They're going to give you a ride for you to drive a full season. They sign you a contract for however many races or years. If you bring in a sponsorship, great. But that sponsorship, you could have $10 million of sponsorship a race week flowing in or more. But if you're not doing anything with the opportunity you're given, from a business perspective, they're going to look elsewhere. And I think we as fans maybe not us, but as the guys on this podcast, but we as fans of NASCAR in general forget that it is a business, that it's not just, hey, we like you, we're going to sign you. It's deeper than that. It's deeper than your short tracks. It's deeper than your K&N. You bring the sponsorship money, it's a return on investment.
We bring you in, we expect results.
Yeah, absolutely. It's any other job. If I own a business and I hire you, Rob, and you come in and I'm so excited to have you, I see the potential, but then you let me down, I've got no other choice but to find somebody to replace you. As hard as that is, but if I'm a business owner, I've got to make a return on my investment. I'm pumping in millions and millions of dollars a year to make sure that you can perform. But if you don't perform, then I'm just going to have to cut my losses and move on. I hate it. I agree. AM should have went better around it and about it, but I see why it went the way it did. Not a fan of it, but I understand it.
Yeah, I think, and this will be the final point before we move on to our final topic. I think that, not all of her finishes, like some of the rough races that she had, not all of it's her fault. Some of those she's gotten taken out in. And, when she's able to race clean and not be involved in incidents, she may not have that speed that's like top 5, top 10 speed, but she does a good job at keeping her car clean and bringing it home. Like I said, it's just you have too many. You have those DNFs, and those DNFs pile on, and then the team loses out on more and more money, and it's just like, well, do we move on, or do we just run ourselves into the ground? And I think that's the situation they may have found themselves in.
Yeah, for sure. And with that said, we're going to be moving over to the IndyCar portion of this podcast, the final portion of the podcast. And then after that, we're going to be wrapping the show up with our race weekend picks. And yeah, let's head on over. So starting off with the IndyCar news, first topic we want to talk about, as I mentioned before in the NASCAR section, was Newgarden talking about how he wants to race in the Cup Series, and his top two tracks that he wants to do are two tracks that he lives close to in Tennessee, in Nashville and Bristol. What do we think an IndyCar caliber driver like him, championship winning driver, 2 Indy 500 winning driver, what do you think a driver like his respect is going to be doing in a Cup Series race on an oval? Obviously, he has a lot of experience going fast at like places like Texas and Iowa and Indianapolis. But how is the change from going 200 miles an hour plus on an oval to running around 185 at Nashville at the very least? At Bristol, you're going slower. What do you think is going to be? What we're going to be seeing from Newgarden if he does, in fact, do this a single like a one-off race in the NASCAR Cup Series?
I'd say it's the ball is in Roger Penske's court to make it happen. And I get why he wants to run Bristol and Nashville, but I think the obvious choice would be run Indy. Have we really seen an IndyCar guy run the Brickyard 400? I mean, I'm sure it's happened. You can throw in Robbie Gordon, Tony Stewart. But as far as like a one-off deal, why not? I've always wanted to see Scott McLaughlin or Will Power come out and run this race. It's yet to happen, but I still think it's cool that there's an IndyCar guy who's going to go against the norm of running a road course and say, I want to give a short track a try. That's interesting to me. Let's make it happen. Ball's in your court, Roger.
I mean, to your point about like previous IndyCar drivers moving over to Cup or NASCAR scene in general, we've even seen Juan Pablo Montoya run really well at Indianapolis in his stock car. Like a good example is 2010, 2011, where both years he probably should have won the Brickyard 400 those years, but he wasn't able to because, things got in the way of that happening. But I mean, like you said, what better way to have a guy who has, almost 10 plus years of experience at a racetrack going 200 miles plus in an IndyCar and put him in a Cup car to go around the oval. I think that's a good starting point. A lot better than Bristol, Nashville, in my opinion. But I'm interested to see what Rob has to say about this too.
It's truly 50-50. I mean, you look at all the open wheel guys that have come in over the years. Juan Pablo Montoya, he's had some success, but nothing too crazy. Tony Stewart, who came in and just championship winning driver, championship winning owner, Hall of Famer, a lasting legacy on our sport. Robbie Gordon, who did okay for a little bit, raced with RCR, one of the top teams at the time. And then, you look at guys who switched over like Dario Franchitti and Sam Hornish, who struggled. Very much so. Struggled. Even in Xfinity, not a lot of success for Sam Hornish Jr. Hardly any success for Dario Franchitti. Dario Franchitti got hurt in an Xfinity race, for crying out loud. So it's truly 50-50. I mean, you're not going to find a guy like Tony Stewart or Kyle Larson who's that once-in-a-generational talent that can drive anything with a set of wheels on it. But the promise is there with Newgarden. I think he's young enough still. I think there's definitely a drive. And would he do well? I'd like to think so. Do I think he could win? Maybe not Bristol or Nashville. Maybe Chicago, if you took him to Chicago. Maybe Coda. But I don't think necessarily, as cool as it is for him wanting to make a debut on a shorter track, I think the top 3 or 4 tracks you'd have to aim for would be Charlotte, Indy, Coda, and Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely gonna have to be one of those things where you just have to wait and see how it plays out. It's definitely gonna be tough to really make a judgment call on how a guy from a different series is gonna do. I mean, we saw that like an example with SVG. We didn't have any expectations to see how he was gonna do last year at Chicago, and a year later, literally to the weekend, he is a front runner at most of these road courses in Xfinity and Cup, but another topic I want to bring up too is what the difference between IndyCar and NASCAR is. IndyCar is bringing in this new hybrid engine, and the specifications of this new engine is highly intriguing because one of the main things I want to talk about this new hybrid engine too is something that us NASCAR fans have been dying for ever since we have been choking these engines from full potential horsepower from 2015 onwards. And it is, for the first time in 20 years for IndyCar, they're going to be having over 800 plus horsepower in their engines with this new hybrid system. And the question I want to bring up is, how do we think, even though we had some testing in Iowa in the past couple weeks, and I think we tested it at thermal in the off season, how do we think, just based off of the facts that IndyCar has provided with us, and some of the news that we've seen from comments of drivers and testing, how do we think this new hybrid technology is going to work at Mid-Ohio of all places? I mean, we're not going to really see how it's going to work until we go full time next season with this hybrid engine and see how it does from track to track. But Mid-Ohio of all places, it's going to be interesting to see how it works with the extra horsepower and how it all works with the on-track product. And there's certain situations drivers are faced with. But Robert, I'm going to let you take the lead on this answer of what we're going to expect from this hybrid system on track this weekend.
I mean, I think Mid-Ohio is definitely a unique track to start at, like you said. But I think it's a good selection. You're not going out there and putting this on an oval right away or a road course that's like got really ridiculously long straights. Like, you're going to more of a controlled environment. You can get some good data on how it runs, how it feels. I think with the safety advancements that they've made over the years, especially after Weldon's passing, 13 years ago, I think they've made a lot of safety advancements, enough so that they're able to try this technology and to give it a chance. And, will it make the racing better? I'd like to think so. Would we see it on a track like this? It's hard to say because there's a lot of breaking points, and like I said, there's not a lot of There's not a lot of long straightaways at Mid-Ohio. It's a very curvaceous track. So I think it's a good place to get some data and to see how the drivers feel about it. But I feel like in order for us to truly get a good evaluation, let's see it on a longer road course or an oval.
I mean, to that point, with Mid Ohio being the first track to test it on, I feel like it's not the perfect track, but it's a very good selection for it, because if you guys are subscribed to the Apex Bros podcast YouTube channel, you guys were able to see the YouTube exclusive video that I put out with the virtual hot lap I did on iRacing with the IndyCar, and how really flowy most of the track is after the first couple corners. The track is very flowy from corner to corner, a lot of undulation changes. So I feel like passing is going to be tough with at least the technical sections, but at the same time, the way this new technology is going to work is some little insider info is the new regen system. It works when it activates when these guys are in a braking or certain or specific throttle position. So the engine gains power back or deployable power back when they're in the braking zones or when they're lifting off or, under caution and stuff like that. And the manual regen is literally exactly how push to pass is currently. It's activated on a button on a steering wheel for the drivers to be, deployed on demand, really. And, with the way push to pass is only really able to be used on road courses, how do you think this is gonna play along to that, of the ability of raceability with this new engine and power unit in a track like this that's flowy and it's got a couple decently long straights? How do we think it's gonna work out? And Nate, I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
I'm curious to see it, and honestly, I think it's just one of these issues where we're going to have to just watch and see what happens. I'm glad they chose a track like Mid Ohio over saying, let's go all in on it. Let's do the Indy 500 with this new hybrid system. Like, to me, that would be a bit of a stretch. Mid Ohio, it's not the biggest course on the circuit. It's definitely not going to be the race that makes or breaks this system. But I think it's going to give us a good idea of what we can expect in the future and what these drivers can expect, because they're going to race this car or with this new package, and they're going to say, okay, here's what I like, here's what I dislike. And I'm sure they'll voice that to IndyCar. I don't know if IndyCar's, as bad as NASCAR to just flat not listen to their drivers. I hope they're better about it. And I guess we'll see. If it's a success, it's a success, and they'll keep it the way it is. If it flops, then I hope IndyCar will be proactive about it and fix the things that need fixed to make a better racing product, not only for the fans, but for the guys behind the wheel.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a good point. It's crazy to think about how much is going to be changing in IndyCar over the next year or so. And, the good thing about them testing it now, it's the first week of July. You're still going to have about 6-7 months before next season starts to work on this. So I think it's good to actually have a race out there, get some important data from the teams and the drivers, and ultimately see if these cars can handle this hybrid technology. Hopefully we're not in a situation where there's a lot of engine failures or, people DNFing due to the mechanical issues, because that's a very real possibility. We could go to this race this Sunday or Saturday or whenever it is, and we could see several guys DNF from mechanical or engine failure.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting race to really go into the unknown of what to expect for this race. And another concern that I've seen on social media is, how is this regen process with the hybrid engine going to work on ovals? Because if they're like having to lift off in the corners, how quickly is that engine able to redistribute that energy when the drivers want to? That's something that we're going to be definitely checking out when we go to ovals this season at Iowa. I think it's the next one. The next one coming up. But moving on to the next topic is big news that happened in the past 48 hours is Alexander Rossi put out that he is going to be parting ways at the end of the season with Arrow McLaren after 2 to 3 years racing with them. Decently competitive. He's had his bright spots, but also had his low spots, as any McLaren driver in IndyCar has had in the past couple of years. But with that announcement being made, the same day, Hailie IndyCar made an announcement that Lundgaard and Hailie are going over to McLaren next year as Arrow, the sponsor for McLaren, Arrow scales back sponsorship. What do we think based off of Lundgaard? Last year, first career win with Rahal, Letterman, Lange racing at the streets of Toronto. Very chaotic race, considering it's a really tight street course. But based so far this season, Lundgaard's had a very up and down season. Big down being the Indy 500 with the way RLL have been in the past couple years with their engines and the speed at the 500. Lundgaard's performance and speed is, not to be denied by the car that he's driving right now. I mean, Lundgaard's been top 10 material for most of the season, and, with a good parallel comparison from IndyCar to NASCAR to make it easier for the viewers to understand, is Lundgaard is kind of like the Christopher Bell, if you will, of IndyCar right now, except he doesn't have as much wins as Bell and Cup. But I'm trying to find another good analogy of Lundgaard to NASCAR, but he's one of those drivers where if he's in the right position, he is there for the podium. If he has the right strategy, has the right speed in the car.
Like Chris Buescher.
Exactly. Yeah, he's like Chris Buescher of IndyCar. So imagine this. So for the NASCAR fans out there, imagine Chris Buescher going from RFK, an up-and-coming team right now that has a lot of speed, and a lot of speed in the driver, moving from a team that was mid to low pack for the longest time, moving up to a highly regarded team like Penske. How do we think Lundgaard's gonna perform when he gets this opportunity to drive McLaren seat next season?
With Arrow scaling back sponsorship, it kind of worries me. I'm worried about how much funding and how much resources this team's going to have next season.
I mean, Hy-Vee has been dedicated to Lundgaard for the past couple seasons. I mean, they've been dedicated with RLL for the past 2 seasons. I think Jack Harvey drove with them and with their sponsor in 2022. So, I mean, there's no doubt that Hy-Vee is committed to Lundgaard no matter what. Like you said, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how McLaren is going to do with Arrow scaling back sponsorship, with Pato, and that whoever the hell is driving that third car, the number 6. Who knows who's going to be driving it next year? But it's definitely going to be interesting to see how well McLaren's going to be performing next season with the lack of sponsorship from Arrow, though.
My question is, if they're scaling back, are they scaling back as in we're going to sponsor this many races, or we're going to be a little logo on a side panel? Because that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's rare to see a sponsor scale back in IndyCar. More rare than to see them just completely drop sponsorship completely. It's just uncommon to me. Like, of course, when you change teams, you might lose a sponsor here and there, but Hy-Vee. Look, if they're wanting to push as much funding as they have in the past to him, more power to them. But I'm really curious to see, are we going to see Arrow on the car as a big deal as a primary sponsor, or are they just going to kind of be backseat driving it and just pushing a little bit of funding here and there?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what kind of scaling back we're talking about with Arrow is going to be doing with McLaren. I think the way Arrow has been committed to McLaren ever since McLaren has taken over that team, I think in 2020 or 2021, I think it's just going to be like kind of going to be on select races throughout the season because, I mean, Hy-Vee is a big sponsor, especially like when they go to Iowa, that, the sponsored race at Hy-Vee weekend, that is a marquee event for Hy-Vee as a company. So it's very important to Hy-Vee, I assume, to be on this car for most of the season to get their brand out there on a McLaren IndyCar nonetheless. And I think with the speed that Lundgaard's shown the past couple of years, there's no doubt in my mind that they're going to be the reason why Arrow is scaling back sponsorship. I don't know if it's going to be just for Lundgaard's sake, or if it's going to be for the whole team sponsorship, like with all the other drivers. So that's going to be interesting to see how Pato and how if Siegel's going to be the next season, how those two other drivers are going to try and find more sponsorship outside of Arrow. But speaking of the young lineup for McLaren, how do we think McLaren's young driver lineup is going to perform in the long run if they stick with Siegel, if they stick with Lundgaard in the long run? You know, Pato's no doubt in my mind. Pato's going to be there for a while. There's no reason I can see Pato leaving that team for any reason. But what do we think? It's like what we saw with Hendrick Motorsports in 2018 when we saw Junior retired 2017, brought in Alex Bowman, Byron to the 24, Elliott to the 9, and then you got this old guy, Jimmy Johnson, you know, pretty much the twilight of his career in the 48. How do we think, with Pato being the one driver that's been there the longest, show these other guys how to behave themselves, or rather, you know, mentor Siegel or give Lundgaard some tips and tricks on how to go about running with this kind of equipment?
Patience. Patience is the key word here. I think that you've got to be. I understand that you're probably wanting to jump into the rest of the season with Siegel wanting results, but it's going to take some time to adjust. I think 2025 opens up a whole new batch of opportunities for Lundgaard, for Siegel. Let Pato be the veteran leader you need him to be. Be patient. Give these guys time to gel. If I would say if things don't work out by 2026, by the end of the 2026 season, go back to the drawing board. Give these guys a year or two to figure things out first. Don't crush them with unrealistic expectations.
So to the point with Pato being the new veteran of the team, does he lean on Rossi for the remainder of the season to seek advice on how to mentor younger guys like Siegel, if he is, you know, to be racing for them next season? Do we think Pato is going to be leaning on Rossi and, you know, bugging him as much as possible about how to go about something like this, being a mentor position in this team?
I think it's a good idea. I mean, I would obviously soak up any advice from the veteran drivers as you can, you know. Doesn't necessarily even have to be Rossi, you know. You've got veterans in the sport that have been there for a long time, you know. Graham Rahal's a great example, you know, of a guy that's been in the series a long time. You know, Tony Kanaan is still around the sport. Go in the garage. Ask around these crew members, these drivers who've been around a long time, and just soak it all in. After all, that's what that knowledge and advice is there for, to pass it down to the next generation of drivers and to keep passing it down. Take advantage of the assets that you have, especially with Rossi being there every week.
For sure. And Nate, I'm dying to hear what you guys say about this too.
I think I'm kind of dwelling on what you said about the Hendrick situation, about how, you know, Jimmy Johnson was the only veteran left, and then there's a bunch of young guys that's going to have to train up. Like, look, if I was Pato, I would be running to Alexander Rossi and be like, tell me everything you know to tell a young guy, so I can be the leader of this team. Because let's face it, he's stuck in that position now. He's the veteran of the team. He knows the ins and outs. He's got to be the teacher. And I think he's fully capable of it. I'm excited to see where it goes. And like Rob said, patience. I don't expect this new lineup to set the world on fire. I say that a lot. That's kind of my thing, I guess, to set the world on fire. but I don't see them being the team that all year long, when you see IndyCar headlines, that's going to be the first thing that pops up. They're going to kind of be middle of the road. Like, people's going to be watching them, but set your expectations low and you'll never be disappointed. I'm not saying expect them to just flat out suck, but expect them to have some growing pains. I mean, this is a whole new season for the whole team, and as fans, you've got to respect that. And then as drivers, as team owners, as crew members, you've got to respect that, because it will come to play eventually. And if there's a weekend, then that weekend will fall off, and then they'll go to the next chapter. But on the flip side, they could come out way, way, way ahead. And I hope that's the case, because I want to see this team succeed. I always like seeing young drivers succeed no matter what series we're in. And it just so happens we're in IndyCar this time. So cool. I look forward to seeing what the future holds for these guys.
Definitely. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's what anyone hopes to see is nothing but good things from McLaren, especially the season that they've been having so far. But to move on to our next topic, it's along the lines with, driver lineup with teams and everything. And it's about Prema. We talked about last week how they're seeking pretty much Logan Sargent to drive their car in IndyCar next season. Prema, the backstory for them, Prema is a F2 team who is, a very strong team in that series and has proven that they are able to go and make championships out of young drivers in F2. And the deal is Logan Sargent is pretty much getting released by Williams by the end of the season. We covered that last week. And the news with Prema is that they've confirmed that they've been talking with Logan Sargent for a potential start next season. Do we see it being a one-car team? Do we see it being, a two-car team? Because, there's been talks about Callum Ilott, who is a former Prema driver as well, could be a potential teammate for Logan Sargent. And with that happening, it's literally two former Prema championship drivers in an IndyCar series together as teammates. I'm just curious to see, what do you guys think is going to happen if, this does happen with Sargent and Prema coming to fruition in IndyCar?
I think, and I'm going to sound like a skeptic here, and y'all can disagree, but if this happens, this is a much better deal for Prema than it is for Logan Sargent, because Prema is like, okay, we've got a veteran driver, a guy who's experienced, a guy who's successful. For Logan Sargent, he's having to, take his experience and then hope that this team catches up to where he's been. And if I was Prema, I would try to keep it a one-car team your first year. Because, yeah, you can be aggressive, make it a two-car team. But if you really want to stabilize, okay, this is where we're at, keep it a one-car team. Logan Sargent's a good pick. Again, better deal for Prema than it is Logan Sargent. But I think in the end, it could work out for both.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point to be talked about, is it being literally a better situation for Prema than Logan Sargent, because if you look at it this way, Formula One is a lot, widely known motorsport across the globe. It's when you think of motorsports in any country, you're probably going to hear most of the answers being F1 or something like that, With that being said, Logan Sargent's going from one of the most well-known sports in the entire world to going to a new team that we don't know how it's going to perform, what alliances they're going to have with any of the other teams in IndyCar. From going to a widely known motorsport to being a really smaller and lesser known motorsports within America. I mean, outside of America, I don't think IndyCar is really talked about. Not nearly as much as F1 has been in the past decade, I'd say. And I feel like for Logan Sargent, that's going to be a big downgrade, and for his stock and for his image as a driver to make that move, which is difficult for me to say because, in my opinion, IndyCar is better than F1 in terms of competitiveness and everything between all the teams. That's another discussion for another podcast episode. But I'm interested to see what.
Give IndyCar a series on Peacock like they did F1 on Netflix, and I think
They
you'll see
have.
more notoriety.
They actually have.
Oh.
They've done a Netflix style Drive to Survive style series on Netflix, and that's where I feel like is kind of a troubling spot for IndyCar, is that they've done what F1's trying to do with, or what F1 is doing with Drive to Survive on Netflix, and in my opinion, other than the first season, what we saw on social media, this second season that just came out recently, 100 Days to Indy, I don't really see the push or the acknowledgement of IndyCar no more than what it was before the Netflix series came out. I may be wrong about this. I may be blind to some of the gains that IndyCar has made. Only they know, because they have all the analytics and everything of how, how many more people watch the series on a weekly basis. But I mean, yeah, to that point, they've tried to do what F1 is doing, but I don't think it's working.
It shows how well they're pushing it. I had no idea it existed.
I mean, they have it on CW first, and then they put it to Netflix, which is probably why it's not that that known. If they did it originally on Netflix, it'd probably be a lot more well known in the social media and everything. But yeah, it's interesting situation IndyCar as a whole is in. But Rob, I'd like to turn it over to you to see what you think about this news with Prema and Sargent.
I think we're glossing over a potential driver candidate that could be in a second car for them, and that's Theo Pourchaire. I think that there's an opportunity there because he's still on loan from Sabre F1. They really would like him to be in a car for the rest of the season and next year. Why not pair up Logan Sargent with someone who has IndyCar experience in that second car? It'd still be a young lineup. And I think it would do Sargent and Pourchaire wonders to actually to try to build that chemistry and to try to build that team up from the ground up.
When you say
now, in terms,
well, sorry,
go ahead.
But when you say that as well, it also brings to mind that with Pourchaire getting backing from Sauber F1 team, it is going to bring a lot more competitiveness and a lot more strength to the new Prema team that I just didn't really take into consideration until you brought that point up. Is if Pourchaire goes to the team with backing from Sauber, that new team Prema is going to be able to find a lot more speed and success and have a better launch pad into the series if they do in fact are able to get that second driver in with Pourchaire.
Yeah. And I definitely think that's what they need to go with, is go where the funding is. And it's hard to say because, Sargent could end up being very talented in F1 or in IndyCar. And I'm not saying that he don't deserve a ride with the team, but I mean, if you go with what Nate's saying and you want to start it off as a one-car team, then Pourchaire is the way to go. 100%. And to your guys' point about talking about like the Netflix special 100 Days to Indy, the biggest thing that I've seen from IndyCar this year was when Kyle Larson tried to do the double. And it brought a lot of NASCAR fans over to Indy and some Indy fans over to NASCAR and vice versa because they wanted to see what happened that weekend. But I would say IndyCar is still making strides. They've got a full-time deal with Fox next year where Fox is going to broadcast every single race. Like, it's not FS1, FS2. It's going to be on Fox. With them losing the Xfinity Series but gaining the IndyCar Series, in my opinion, is a win. Because IndyCar is finally going to have that basic cable platform all season, not just select races on NBC. If Fox can get their camera situation fixed and get their production issues fixed, this is a huge win for IndyCar.
That's a whole topic we need to talk about on this podcast at some point.
Oh, yeah.
Is the comparisons of the broadcast. My Lord, I go on for hours about that, but I won't do that here.
Yeah, I've totally forgot to talk about Fox. I mean, that whole deal with IndyCar and main channel Fox is going to be a big stepping stone for IndyCar and their strides to getting towards the mainstream media with the likes of F1. I mean, when you think about F1, you think about how accessible it is to watch one of their races. I mean, they have a partnership with ESPN. They have their own deals in the European side with Sky Sports F1 and everything. I mean, when you think about F1, it's very convenient for the casual fan to just turn on ESPN and watch an F1 race. And I feel like when IndyCar moves to Fox full time next year, it's gonna be interesting to see how it works out. I mean, I remember reading up on it. It's not gonna be Fox production. It's gonna be like IndyCar. Like the production is gonna be done by IndyCar, but like the broadcast is by Fox. So it's pretty much what we've been seeing from NBC this year and on Peacock and everything on USA. It's going to be like that, but we're obviously going to be having different commentators. Unfortunately, we're not going to have Lee Diffie, which is going to be a big blow, in my opinion, of the Indy 500 at least. Because when you think about the Indy 500 and IndyCar, I think about Lee Diffie as the main play-by-play in the booth. But I'm excited. I'm excited to see what Fox can do for IndyCar. I can only hope for the best for IndyCar in this new TV deal. It's just, when I first heard the news, I was like everyone else. I was a huge skeptic because of how awful. I mean, as much slander as Fox gets, I know they do some good here and there, but I can't help but think how difficult it's been to watch these Cup races as a NASCAR fan on Fox and FS1. But seeing the news come out saying it's like, hey, it's not going to be like what we've seen on NASCAR. It's gonna be better. It's gonna be what we've been seeing on NBC and everything. So that gives me high hopes for next season and the new TV deal.
And I would say, a big part of that has to be Penske and Ganassi. They want to keep things the way that they were in terms of the broadcast. That was a huge part of the deal that IndyCar and Fox, when they agreed to that deal, Penske and Ganassi, they were like, hey, we have it broadcasted a certain way. We like this way, and we don't want it to change.
Yeah, I mean, the best example I can say for expectations for next season on Fox with IndyCar is remember how NBC was back in the good old days of NASCAR in the mid 2000s. Yeah, with Alan Bestwick, Benny Parsons, that production style and the booth and everything. That's something we can look forward to in Fox is having the accessibility as a fan to watch IndyCar on main cable.
Yeah. But yeah, I think with everything going on, I think the hybrid technology, all the silly season rumors, I think IndyCar is in a good spot, and I think the future for IndyCar is becoming brighter and brighter with each year that's passing. But I think with that, it is gone ahead, and we're going to go ahead and move on to some minor notes, and then we're going to wrap up the show. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
A huge thanks to Victory Fuel for sponsoring us at the Apex Pros podcast. Victory Fuel, fueled by electrolytes charged with vitamins, no caffeine or carbonation, and it's kid-friendly. Use code APEX10 at checkout for 10% off your order today.
All right, guys, welcome back. Hopefully you've enjoyed the podcast so far. I'm just going to hit a couple more notes that we may not have hit earlier, and then we're going to go ahead and get our race predictions for F1 and NASCAR, and then we'll wrap up. So just a little bit of news on dirt racing this week. Not a whole lot that stuck out to us while getting together and doing our research, but there was this one big story, and I thought it was important. So the World of Outlaws has granted a temporary lift on driver exclusivity. So the lift allows drivers from the 1st to the 8th of this month. They can race anywhere they would like, wherever they want, without it counting towards their allotment of 4 races that they're given per season. And I think that's nice. We've had a lot of cancellations due to weather this season in the World of Outlaws, so I definitely think this is good for the drivers. And I applaud Woo for doing this. I think it's a good move on their part. And then we'll just go ahead and move to one last piece of NASCAR news that might ignite a little bit more conversation. Josh Berry. Hello, it's me, the guy who predicted this last week. Josh Berry to Wood Brothers Racing on a multi-year deal. That's good for at least 2025 and 2026. Roddy Childress, however, not confirmed to go with him, and at this point is looking unlikely to go with him. Can Josh Berry and Wood Brothers succeed and put up good results without Rodney there? What do you guys think?
Well,
I'll
first,
just say that this completely busted my silly season bracket. Well, it started with Chase Briscoe going to Joe Gibbs, but man, this just screwed it up because I was on the train that Chase Briscoe's going to the 21. He's staying in the Ford camp. He's been with the Ford camp, and my whole life's just ruined. It's ripped my heart out. Absolutely ripped it out. But again, set your expectations low. You'll never be disappointed.
yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see nothing yet confirmed about Childers following Josh Berry because I feel like that is a potent combo, ready to explode in the Cup scene. Because I mean, this is like it's like what we saw with Harvick and Childers pairing for so long, but yet we're just now starting to see the momentum starting to work its way to fruition. I really hope Childers does follow Barry over to Wood Brothers just because I know that it is going to do Wood Brothers so much good if those two go over together. Because what we've seen so far this season, they have been outright week in and week out the best SHR team. And it's just no question about it. I mean, he's been really solid along with Chase Briscoe too. Pretty much the whole team except Priest unfortunately hasn't been that fast. But that aside, I do want to ask Rob, are you a time traveler? Because I don't think there's anyone that could have at least in this podcast admitted that they would have seen this coming other than you.
I mean, you have to think, Josh Berry being represented by Kevin Harvick, and we all know Kevin Harvick and Dale Jr. are good friends. So they're going to put their best interests in mind for him. And, front row was a good option, because they're still a decent tier, probably behind RFK and Penske as probably the third best Ford team. But, with Justin Hailie staying put, it kind of took away those rumors. And, Gregson pretty much is going to be confirmed to go in the front row at this point, unless something drastic at Richard Childress happens. I think that Barry going to Wood Brothers is the right move, and do not be surprised if Barry performs well enough that we see him go to Penske in the number 2 car by the end of 2026 or 2027.
If this
That's
happens,
my
I'm going to
prediction.
fall over. I'm going to fall over.
I'm gonna say, is there anything else you?
Time traveler.
I was gonna say, is there anything else you want to tell us, Rob, to confirm that you are a time traveler? Is Denny Hamlin gonna finally win the championship this season? Is it gonna happen?
I mean, I'm not a wizard, Harry, but
I love the reference.
Anything's possible. I still think Denny Hamlin is one of the favorites to win the championship. You can't ever rule him out until the final race of the season, which is Phoenix, and he's notoriously not good there. So, sorry, but
all offense taken. All offense taken. I think Hamlin is perfect at that track. No, but no, I give you credit. He's not that good at that track, I will say. But continue. Go ahead.
I think Childress is going to stay with Haas, and I think if I had to predict it, Childress either stays with Haas and becomes Cole Custer's crew chief when he moves back up the Cup next year, or he goes with Gregson in the front row. There's no doubt in my mind he stays as a Ford crew chief. I think Wood Brothers is content with their crew, at least in the crew chief part at the moment, even though some of us aren't. We obviously know that Harrison Burton is either going to be in a less funded Cup ride or probably more or less in Xfinity next year. And, Priest is probably moving back down to Xfinity next year. So, I mean, the way this is shaping up, Custer will probably have the Haas riding Cup. You have Burton and Priest in their Xfinity program. You have Gregson move over to the 34 because you have Gilliland already re-signed, and plus that third charter, Obviously, Kaz Gralla raced in the 36 for front row, but looks like he could be doing well in the 15 as well. So it's hard to say who's going to get that third ride for front row, but I think Gregson is going to get one of those rides. And it could be Sam Mayer, as we've talked about, going the front row, but it could be another veteran driver as well. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting to follow up, but those are my predictions for what's to come in the silly season.
Call me.
The only request I have for the 15 car is if they keep Kaz Gralla and that N29 sponsor, they get rid of those ugly yellow wheels. My God, I hate seeing them. Hate seeing them.
I was going to say along the lines of Rick Ware Racing, call me crazy, but hear me out. What if the way Hailie's been running that 51, and the way you said you can only see Childers stay in the Ford camp, Rob, imagine, you see where I'm going with this, imagine Childers going over to Rick Ware Racing to help out Justin Hailie and bring that team to a whole new level next season. That would be a crazy thing to happen.
While I like your idea and while I like your thinking, why would you break up the chemistry that Hailie and his crew chief already have?
True.
They've had at least 3 or 4 top 10s. They've had 7 or 8 top 20s. The team is outperforming. He's outperforming his old colleague rides, which is a shock to many. But I think Justin Hailie has all the potential in the world to take that team to make them a good single car team, kind of like how Furniture Row was. Will they be on that championship level? I doubt it. But trust me, you'll be hearing a little bit more about Justin Hailie in my predictions for the Cup race at Chicago.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, Chicago is definitely going to be a shining spot for Hailie. I mean, considering how well he run there in colleague equipment last year, expect to see the Rick Ware Racing car well inside the top 10, maybe top 5.
For sure. But, guys, I think it's that point, where we go ahead and get our predictions. But first, again, just want to shout out Victory Fuel for sponsoring us along this journey. Whenever you're in need of something to quench your thirst, they're first. So use their code APEX10, that's APEX10, on their website where you can save 10% off your order. All right, so now we got our shameless plug out of the way. We can go ahead and get our predictions for F1 Silverstone, I believe is where they're at this week. So obviously I'm going to stay on the Verstappen bandwagon. I mean, until you find me somebody that can dethrone him out of finishing out of the top 5, because even with that incident last week, he still finished top 5. It's you're going to have to put me in the wall to convince me otherwise that he's not winning.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to piggyback off of Rob's pick, or do I have to pick somebody different?
I mean, you can if you want, but I mean,
I'm going Verstappen. At least it's a safe bet. If nothing else, it's a safe bet. You might see me pick Verstappen the rest of the season, probably for the next 10 years if he keeps driving this way. But safe bet. Nothing lost, nothing gained.
No, not at all. I mean, as crazy as it was last week to see Lando and Verstappen make contact and take each other out of contention for the win, I'm going to have to stay on the George train. I kind of like the momentum that he and Mercedes have been on so far this season. I mean, the last couple of races have been, it's been interesting. They've had their bright spots. They've had some low points this season too. But I mean, the way this Mercedes team functions after getting a win like that, no matter how you get it in F1, this Mercedes teams always finds a way to build off of that momentum from a win, and they always find a way to just keep getting better, keep pushing to be faster the following week. So I see George Russell taking the win at his home Grand Prix nonetheless. He ran very well last year at that race, I believe. I correct me if I'm wrong, but he ran there pretty well. I see George running really well at Great Britain, and then IndyCar, we got Mid Ohio with this new hybrid engine. A lot of unknowns. I'm thinking. See, last year we went there. Pelot won, and I think the year before that, 22 was McLaughlin, and then 21 was Herta, I think. So it's been very, very mixed on who's been good there. I mean, Dixon is a common denominator, as always, with Mid Ohio and most road courses in IndyCar. So I'm gonna go with Dixie. I'm gonna go with Dixon on at Mid Ohio this weekend. I mean, just his experience being there for so long. I mean, he's been the one of the most consistent drivers in the series outside of Pelot. So I think Dixon's gonna get another win this season.
Yeah, I can see that. And obviously, we can't forget about our boys, Leander and Cody. You know, they've got their picks typed out to us, even though they couldn't be here. They're here in spirit. So their F1 picks, Leander went with Lando Norris, and Cody is also on the Verstappen choo-choo train.
By the way, I don't think you guys should go with Verstappen because Cody picked Verstappen last week, and we all know what happened at Spielberg. So I think you guys should pick someone else. But if you want to pick Verstappen like Cody and deal with your losses, that's on you guys. That's on you.
For their IndyCar picks, we brought up Pelot, so Leander went with him. Cody went with Joseph Newgarden. I'm gonna go with Will Power. I'm going to go out of the box. I want to pick somebody different, and I would love to see Will Power get a win.
Well, you talk about going out of the box, so I'm going to go real out of the box. This guy has no wins this season, but he's fourth in points. I think it's coming. You mentioned him earlier, number 26 of Colton Herta. I think he's got it at Mid-Ohio.
I mean, that's my guy. He and Andretti have been pretty consistent for the most part on most of the tracks that they've been to, but it's just been that whole issue of capitalizing on key moments. I mean, Detroit, they had probably one of the fastest cars in the field. It wasn't hard to see that Herta and Andretti were going to win that race if they hadn't messed up the strategy like they've done before in previous years, which they in fact did. In that situation, Herta had to pit in for rain tires, and it only rained for a couple laps on their safety car, and then they went back green and it dried up really fast. So if they just eliminate those miscues with strategy and everything, and they can finally get good momentum, good starting position, I'm with you, Nate. I can see Herta winning his first race of the season. They've been showing potential. It's just that whole execution factor at the end of these races, trying to make the best of their situation and getting a podium at the very least, or a win.
I got disconnected.
I thought he died. I'm glad to know he just got disconnected.
Awkwardly lead us out to the next point, which is
no, you're good. Discord dropped the ball like Cody picking his driver at Nashville.
Speaking of which,
anyway,
NASCAR predictions.
NASCAR Xfinity. Let me see who I believe Cody and Leander both went with SVG for Xfinity.
Yes, yeah.
Even though Cole Custer won last year.
Well, if you think about it, Cole Custer won in the rain-shortened race. So yeah, it's a win, but like at the same time, it's kind of half credited.
It's a big. So there's a lot of good entries in this list. Like you look at the guys in here. Obviously you have Cole Custer, but you also have guys like you have Logano, you have Allmendinger, you have Larson, you got Ty Gibbs, Carson Quaffle, he was brought up earlier, SVG obviously. I think, and Suarez is in here too. If I had to pick somebody, I'm going Kyle Larson for Xfinity. I'm going to be different. I think it's a no-brainer that there's going to be another Cup winner in Xfinity for the third week in a row. Give it to Kyle Larson in Xfinity.
I'm going to go kind of in that same direction, but different. Go with Ty Gibbs. He's proved it on a road course. He's great in an Xfinity car. His luck so far hasn't been great in an Xfinity car this season, but we're on a road course. So Ty Gibbs is my man for this one.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm looking at the entry list for this Xfinity race at Chicago, some of the guys that really stand out to me is obviously SVG, known road course racer, won Sonoma in dominating fashion, and Portland. The other guy is Daniel Suarez coming from Cup down. Parker Retzlaff, he's been pretty good on some of these road courses every now and again. He's proven to, have some unknown speed as well in that car. John Nemechek, he was good there at the road courses last year in Xfinity. He could be one of the guys to watch. Ty Gibbs, like Nate said. Sheldon Creed may have some speed. We don't know with how iffy his reliability has been this season and his speed in that car overall.
Is he gonna finish second again?
No, that's a good question.
Is he gonna break the record?
I don't think it's gonna be Chicago. I think it's gonna be the next race. Where are they heading to after Chicago? I forget. But I think it's gonna be I think it's gonna be whatever race is after Chicago. I don't see Sheldon Creed necessarily being top 2 contention. But I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if he did. I mean, that's how he's been with Xfinity and road courses. Like, he either has the speed or he is dead last. So he's going to be an interesting guy to watch. You got AJ Allmendinger. He's going to be another guy to watch, but iffy equipment with Colleague this season. Like we mentioned before, Logano in the 15. Really going to be a telltale sign to see if AM racing is the issue or not. And then the other guy I really want to talk about too is Sam Mayer. Sam Mayer, I feel like he's really kind of like under the radar kind of guys at these road courses. Like, if you think back to Portland, I think it was Sam Mayer that tagged the tire barrier on the last exit going onto the straightaway, and that cut down his left rear. If it wasn't for that, he probably would have had a shot to win that race. And then we all know what happened at Sonoma, that huge pile up, everyone got taken out. So who knows what could have been for Sam Mayer at Sonoma, but I think I'm going to go with Sam Mayer at Chicago. I mean, he's been his first couple wins came at road courses, came at Road America last year, and then the other one came at the Roval last year. So it wouldn't surprise me if
giving off Chase Elliott Xfinity
exactly. It wouldn't surprise me if Sam Mayer goes out and, for lack of better terms, dominates this race.
I think those are all good points. Mentioned a lot of guys who have a shot. Interesting that you're the only one that really went for an actual Xfinity driver.
I mean, if you think about it, Sam Mayer, aside from SVG and Allmendinger and everything, Sam Mayer has had the most success out of anyone in this field with road course wins in this car. So I think it's kind of hard to go bet against Sam Mayer with his success on road courses in Chicago like last year. I don't know where he finished last year, but I hope he finished well so I can prove my point. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to bet against the guy.
And with that, we finally move over to the Cup side of things. Leander has Ty Gibbs in the Cup Series. Cody has SVG sweeping the weekend. I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Nate. Who do you think takes the win on the Cup side?
I'm going to go completely different. I'm going to go with Tyler Reddick.
It's a good pick. It's a very good pick. He's been very consistent.
Solid.
Max, how about you?
I'm currently trying to find the entry list right now, so Rob, you go ahead and take the pick.
I'm going to go ahead and go with Justin Hailie. You can make the argument for Christopher Bell because of the role he's been on. He led the most laps there last year. SVG ended up winning the race, but Justin Hailie has got this place figured out. And if he was finishing second or third here last year with colleague equipment, I think that if he's doing better this year in rare racing equipment, this is his race to lose. I'm going Justin Hailie. Justin Hailie wins this race, solidifies himself in the playoffs, and makes that race to the bubble cutoff all the more chaotic.
I mean, speaking about chaos, I mean, who has the last position right now in the 16th?
Bowman's got it by 51 points.
That's gonna, oh my gosh, that is gonna destroy so many people's like playoff brackets and everything. It's gonna be crazy if Hailie does in fact pull off the win. But looking at the entry list, I mean, Nate, you bring up a really good point. Reddick was stout there last season with the 45. He's been pretty solid. He's been iffy at some road courses. I mean, last road course I feel like he's struggled with was Roval last year. But so far this year, Reddick's been pretty solid on road courses. I mean, Justin Hailie is not a bad pick at all for the win. I really want to go with him, but I mean, I gotta look at the other options on this list. I mean, last year Denny Hamlin started on pole. He led the first couple laps and made a mistake, and Reddick got past him. But Denny's pretty solid. I mean, just from the one race we raced there last year, and conditions can be completely different. He could be running dead last. So I don't know if he's the wisest pick right now, but with the momentum he's been on, he could. But I want to say, I'm gonna go with Kyle Larson. Actually, I'm picking Kyle Larson. Probably the most consistent road racer on the Cup Series. When you think of Kyle Larson and road course racing, there's no question in my mind that you think of him being in the top two at the very least. However, it is going to be very interesting to see how well he's able to gauge his aggressiveness that he's been showing for most of the season, to see how well that's going to accommodate for the hard passing zones at Chicago. So I'm picking Larson, but it's very, very timid picking of Kyle Larson just because of how he's been racing the past couple weeks.
It's definitely an interesting array of picks for both the Xfinity and Cup side, and some of the same picks just in the opposite series. A couple other guys to probably keep an eye on this weekend. Kyle Busch finished top 5 at Chicago last year. SVG, the defending winner of this race, and he's going to have an additional race to prepare himself for this Cup race. Of course, Denny Hamlin got the pole last year. Christopher Bell, we've talked about. Chase Elliott, who always seems to do well at road courses as well. You can't count him out of a road course race. You bring up Larson, you got to bring up Elliott too. It's like they're the Jeff Gordon and Tony Stewart of this generation when it comes to road courses.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt in my mind it's hard to bid against, guys like Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, and Reddick that have made their presence known on road courses like this. I mean, I'm pretty sure it was a couple of years ago where we saw a head-to-head battle with Elliott and Larson for the win. I think it was at the Indy road course. So, I mean, it's definitely a tough bet to bet against, like those front runners. It's hard.
Yeah, and of course, just bringing up a former road course winner this season, William Byron. William Byron has had a Jeremy Mayfield-like season. He's either winning or running top 5, or he's taking an early exit or running outside the top 20.
Just without the whole drug operation.
But I think on that note, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up for this week. Special thank you to Nate, who came in and filled in within a few hours' notice.
Amazing job.
It was great to have you on, and you might be seeing more of him in the future. So,
don't curse these people like that. Don't do that to them.
Oh, come on. You're perfect. Come on.
But for Nate, Max, Leander, Cody, and myself, this has been the Apex Bros podcast. Enjoy your 4th of July weekend. Enjoy the fireworks on and off the track. We'll see you next week. Take care.